do a series of like talking head opinion type pieces where I can give my opinion about certain aspects of kind of studio soundy, live sound, that type of thing. So this is the first of those. Hopefully it will go well. Please be kind in the comments. And if nothing else, it'll allow you to give your opinions as well in the comments. You may make you go and research some topics. The first one I'm going to do is, and I've got some notes with me here, is the what I think are the 5 live sound myths that seem to refuse to die out there. So, I think the key thing is, if you've ever been at a gig where someone said you need to turn the power up, your speakers aren't big enough, you need better cables, that type of thing. Well, we'll try and debunk some of those myths today. I've been doing PAs for years. I've done live bands, musical theatre, other theatre, home recording, studio recording, that type of thing. So hopefully I've got an opinion that's worth something. I don't know. But hopefully, I can give you my opinion and go and research into it and see what you think. I think some of the ideas in some of these myths are logical, but they're possibly not true. Myth number 1. More power means louder. So, this is one that you hear all the time. People assume that if you sort of double the amplifier power, in watts, you'll get double the volume, and that's absolutely not the case. That's not how sound works. You're probably aware that sound is measured in decibels, and decibels are logarithmic. The key thing is that if you want to get something that's twice as loud, then you're going to need to hugely increase the power. So, for example, if you have a 100-watt PA speaker, 200 watts isn't twice as loud. It's just not going to be. 100 watts to 1,000 watts isn't 10 times louder. One of the key aspects in making something sound louder is speaker efficiency, amplifier power and efficiency, types of speakers, technology inside the speakers, speaker design can have a massive impact on that, as well as where you place the speakers, the acoustics of the room, certain things like that. So it's a multifactorial problem, and just increasing the sort of power of the system will not necessarily massively increase your. It will increase it slightly, but not massively increase it or double it if you think you're doubling the power. So when someone says we need more watts, that's actually not necessarily the issue or the problem or the solution. On to myth number 2. Feedback means bad equipment. I don't think there's many musicians who've played live who haven't had to deal with some sort of feedback. Even big concerts in stadiums, things, I've heard feedback. Usually it's dealt with very quickly because the person operating the PA is very efficient and very good, and you hear a squeak for a second and they're on it, or maybe there's technology dealing with it. But it doesn't mean that the equipment's bad. It means that there's a problem somewhere. So whenever feedback happens, people usually blame the musician or the microphone or the equipment or whatever, or the speaker, or maybe the mixer, or maybe the sound guy. But it's more a physics problem. So feedback is essentially where the sound from the loudspeaker gets back into the microphone and creates that loop. You can get feedback with extremely expensive equipment, and you can run perfectly feedback-free, good quality PAs with relatively cheap gear. The causes are usually poor speaker positioning. Having your speakers near where your microphones are. You ideally want your speakers away from where your microphones are. Poor microphone technique. I once did a gig where we had a beautiful setup PA, and one of the singers decided they wanted to walk out front of where the speakers were, stood right in front of a speaker, and was gesturing to the crowd, holding the microphone, which kept waving in front of the speaker, and they wondered why there was some feedback. So that is a key thing. So think about microphone technique, speaker positioning, having excess monitor noise. Perhaps with the monitors positioned not for the type of microphone, because you have usually cardioid microphones or super cardioid. So they will have slightly different wedge placements for those, so get to know those types of things. And excessive monitor noise. One of the key things, which I've done a few videos about in-ear monitoring in the channel, is that's a massive help for sort of fold back and monitor related feedback. So if your band can get into using in-ear monitors, which takes a bit of practice, that's a fantastic thing. If you can get that going. Monitor levels, it could be bad EQ, it could be too much gain. That's another significant cause of feedback, particularly where you've set gain with someone who's not properly singing their song at a high volume. So, always get them to sing a loud song at full pelt, and setting a gain to a microphone with someone going 1 2 into the microphone is not going to massively help set that gain. It tells you the line's working. That's about all it tells you. But you want someone to actually do a full-on, stage volume sort of thing to set the gain. Good equipment can help. There are technological solutions for sort of suppression of feedback and that type of thing, but they're not magic solutions. Feedback can still occur. So again, the sound person needs to be very efficient at trying to deal with that feedback and having a strategy for doing so. So there we go. On to myth number 3. Compression fixes everything. Now, compression's good. I use it a lot for particularly musical theatre or very dynamic vocalists. It's a fantastic tool. It can be useful for drums, can be useful for bass, those types of things. But it needs to be used sparingly. If you treat it like a magic button, where your vocal's not clear, add compression. Bass is uneven, add compression. Drummer too loud, add compression. You probably need to sort those problems at the source. Too much compression can give you a bit of a lifeless, sort of dull, no dynamics sort of performance, which seems a bit lifeless and that sort of thing. Think about mic choice, think about good gain structure. Myth number 4. This is a contentious one. Expensive cables improve sound quality. So this is possibly where this will generate a bit of conversation in the comments, particularly if you've spent lots of money on cables that someone recommended to you. Good cables do matter. Reliable connectors, proper shielding, good quality cable outers. The sort of plastic sheathing that goes around the cable. That really does matter. Build quality is so important. Quality of the soldering, whether or not you can repair the cable, massively important. But a cable, although bad cables can allow other noises to come into the cable, interference and so forth, and be crackly or whatever. But good cables don't necessarily improve the sound; they just stop other stuff getting in. And I'm a great believer in, if you buy slightly more expensive cables than the cheaper ones, you'll get a slightly better build quality. So better connectors, better soldering, better build quality with the cable. So I buy the slightly higher than base level cables, and they're generally good. So they're fairly cheap, that if they break, you've got a few spares and you can chuck them in, and always have spares of everything. If the cable's doing its job well, that's great. Have a spare. Good build quality is so important. But for sort of live sound particularly, durability, repairability, reliability, is probably far more important. And a very posh cable will not be a magic thing that transforms your sound or your mix or whatever. It doesn't really make a massive difference. But it might cause you less problems with interference and other bits getting to the sound, and it may be a reliable cable. So that was myth number 4. Expensive cables make you sound better. No, they don't really. Myth 5. Bigger speakers always sound better. This myth is everywhere, isn't it? So you walk into a gig and immediately someone judges the gig by the size of the speakers. They go, "Oh, it's not going to sound good. Look at the tiny little speakers they've got." You go into a theatre and you see small little speakers along the front of the stage and mounted up, and you think, "Oh, I'm going to see a big musical production here, which has got big live rock music sort of thing. How are they going to pump it through that? Where are the subs?" They're probably there, but they're probably hidden under the stage or something like that. So size of speakers doesn't necessarily mean that the sound will be poor or that the sound will not be loud. How many of the audience out there have the small compact sort of line array type speakers for their main PA rig for small to medium venues? So you've got your kind of sub unit with a stack that fits on it, and they sound big and loud and fantastic, don't they? I mean, I've used the Bose ones, and absolutely fantastic. So my main live setup, 12-inch tops, two-way speakers, and a 12-inch sub is what I tend to use, and they're fantastic. But you speak to other people and they say, "Well, I wouldn't touch a sub unless it's 18 inches," and God, you can have backache, can't you? And imagine a huge van as well. You can get a good loud sound from slightly smaller speakers. It's all about the speaker design, the placement of the speakers, the coverage, the processing, the amplifier. There's so many other factors. The size of the venue, how many people in it, the acoustics makes much more of a difference. And I find for venues up to sort of a few hundred seater, small theatres, and live venues with where there's a sort of dinner with a dance floor and fairly big function room. 12-inch speakers, 12-inch subs, absolutely fantastic. So think about where you place your speakers. If you've got the ability to tune the PA, great. That's great as well. But a wrong PA in a wrong room set up badly can be awful. But a small PA with small size speakers that's good technology, set up in a nice way, can be absolutely fantastic. So the goal isn't bigger speakers, it's clear, consistent, good sounding PA, much more important. That's my 5 myths of live sound. I've got a bonus myth for you though. So if it's loud, it must sound good. How many times have you heard that? So this is a both a live sound myth, but it also falls into the mixing side of things as well. Because if you mix and you mix it too loud, for a small amount of time, it will sound great. Gives you that excitement, gives you that feeling, doesn't it? When you can hear that loud, exciting music, but you'll get ear fatigue, and also it doesn't necessarily mean it sounds better. So when I mix, I always mix at a lower level. So I've got a nice little Heritage Audio RAM little speaker control unit, and I turn it down to -6 on the marker there. So I'll just turn it down a couple of notches, and I mix at a lower volume, because if it sounds good at a lower volume, it will sound good at normal volume as well. And the same thing goes for a PA. Your clarity is the most important thing. a very loud PA may sound good for a short period of time, but you can get a lot of um, uh, ear fatigue and may not be good for the customers. So a good PA where you can sound everything nice and clearly at an appropriate volume, that's the best thing. And obviously take into account the fact that people may be talking. It may be a pubby sort of live venue, and that sort of thing. They'll be shouting and noise and that sort of thing. Also be compassionate to the bar staff who might be within earshot of the PA and they've got to try and take drinks orders and hear themselves think and that sort of thing as well. But appropriate volume for the venue, nice clear PA is probably so far more important. So those are the live sound myths that I've got you for this episode. So I'm going to think about some more sort of talking head opinion pieces, put those out occasionally as little videos in between these slightly bigger project ones that I do. I'll do some more live footage. I've got a gig coming up, which I'm definitely going to film the setup and performance of. Hopefully you found those useful. Feel free to leave a comment. Please like the video, share the video if you feel it's useful, and please subscribe. It takes a lot of time to do these videos. You've got to plan out the script, filming, setting up the cameras and all that sort of thing. So please like the video if you found it useful or entertaining or something to watch, and share it, give it a like, and please subscribe. Subscriptions make a big difference because it all affects the algorithm and gets the video out there more. So many thanks, and I'll see you next time.